right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great.
Okay.
So let's delve into the questions. The first question is, with Nigeria's oil revenue tied to dollars while citizens earn in naira, subsidy removal has significantly impacted fuel prices. How can Nigeria restructure its downstream sector to better shield citizens from forex volatility while maintaining sector viability?
Okay. Thanks, Omono. Thanks for talking to me. So, I mean, if we start with the beginning, the product called crude is a commodity. Now, because of the fact that it's a global commodity in terms of value, people want to earn, or shall I say, a lot of nations want to earn foreign exchange, which obviously makes sense because it's a stronger currency than most local currencies. So that said, Nigeria has a bit of a conundrum, but there are solutions to this conundrum. If you earn in foreign exchange in terms of crude oil, but your economy is naira based, then what you need to do, number one, is drive the value or volume of what you're earning in the US dollar. So what is the first major problem and what's the solution? Nigeria has struggled to get to 2 million barrels of crude oil a day for quite a while.
Yes.
If you notice over November, December, there have been marginal increases. So it means that one solution is this. As we continue to increase crude oil, we will continue based on things like the Naira for crude swap. Begin to find workable solutions where if we're at 2 million, if we're at 2.2, if we're at 2.5, what is the refinery nameplate for local refinery? If it is 450, if it's 460, there's not so much of an issue when we're producing up to par. Unfortunately, because that hasn't happened for quite a while, we've been struggling with both, not being able to meet revenue concentrations, and at the same time, the economy's impact on the populace is terrible. So this is the point. If we increase crude oil barrel, that is one solution. And we're already in that direction. Now it has to be sustained. The second thing is this. We forget that every time you refine petroleum from crude, you are going to sell some of those petroleum products as exports, and some will be used locally.
Yes.
Now, in economics, that's where balance of payments comes in. So it goes to say, the Dangote refinery is up, the Warri refinery is up, the Port Harcourt refinery is up, some modular refineries are up. So assume we have much more crude and can feed them. It does mean that in terms of balance of payments, we move from a net importer to a net exporter. Once that happens, the Naira strengthens. Because a lot of times the issue we have with local pricing is the exchange rate.
Yes.
If an exchange rate was at 400 and it's at 1,007, it goes without saying the greatest trigger to that price increase is the exchange rate. So I believe those are two clear solutions. Number one, focus on intensive exploration, more investments coming so that we are not of 2 million barrels. That's number one. Feed as many local refineries as possible crude feedstock so that they have enough to produce and enough to export. If we sell into sub-Saharan Africa, West Africa, that is dollar revenue as well for the federation through the private account, through the private companies. That Dangote can sell crude and take the money home. He's going to take it to a local bank. It means there's more availability of foreign exchange. So those are two quick solutions, in my opinion, that can stem the tide. The subsidy is gone, the subsidy is gone, but with more revenue, with more foreign exchange, with a stronger Naira, that is the corrective measure. That's what I would say.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So my second question is, despite being Africa's largest oil producer, Nigeria still imports most of its refined petroleum products. Beyond the ongoing Dangote refinery project, what specific policy reform would incentivize more domestic refining capacity, like you said earlier, empower more modular refineries. So we can reduce our dependence on dollar-denominated imports.
Okay. So Omono, this is what I would say.
Yeah.
Can you still hear me clearly?
Yes, clearly.
Good. In my opinion, it is not the policies or the lack of. And I said that to say this. The domestic crude supply obligation is a policy and it's a law that enables local refineries get enough crude. But Omono, they don't get it because it's just not available.
Yes, they don't.
So it's no longer a case of what the law says, what policies are in place, but it goes back to the initial question. The questions and conversations we're having around this will not come up if we are not of 2 million barrels a day. Every time a nameplate for refineries is calculated, it's calculated based on what those refineries need. In my personal opinion, it will be somewhere north of 650 to 750 right now.
Okay.
But again, if we are producing 2.2 or 2.3 million barrels, it makes it easy to give the 750,000 barrels to the local refineries so that they can produce distillates and then they can sell to whoever they need to. So again, it is not in the policies for me. Again, I said the PIA is very clear about the domestic crude supply obligation.
Yes.
So it's not the laws. It's actually the fact that Nigeria has been scraping where it comes to crude oil allocation. You hear sometimes Libya is doing better than us, Angola is doing better than us.
Especially Angola.
Especially Angola. So what it does mean is that Angola is iterating and finding better ways and more efficient ways to bring out crude. We must do same. If we solve that conundrum, then I believe the policies are easier to implement. The second and final thing is this. When it comes to the policies that are not being implemented, it goes back to the regulator. The NMDPRA and the NUPRC are regulators for the oil and gas industry, upstream, midstream, and downstream. So the question is this. If the DSCO says something, if the law says something, and it is not being honored by the NNPC, what does the regulator do about it? Sadly, nothing.
Nothing.
It's also nothing. But it's also a fact that when you look at the regulators of the NUPRC and the NMDPRA, they are products of the NNPC. So with all due respect, they're not going to do what they need to do, quote and unquote, because their hands have been tied and they're telling them to run. So you bring in someone who is independent-minded, knowledgeable about the industry, has a commercial and legal background framework to come and enforce. You will find out that people will sit up.
Yes.
I think that would be the best way for that question, in my opinion, Omono.
Okay, thank you so much. So the third question, the disparity between official and black market dollar rates has historically created arbitrage opportunities in fuel importation. Now, how has this affected the true cost of petroleum products, and what mechanisms could ensure more transparent pricing?
Okay, thank you, Omono. So, I mean, how has it affected? Sadly, negatively, and this is what I'd say. We've had so many windows in terms of exchange rates. Now, so what it means is that those different windows, they find levels at different exchange rates. Now, there was a time the CBN used to do what you call the CBN Intervention Fund.
Yes,
this
I remember.
Now, so every time at that period that we needed to import petroleum product, we needed to write to two bodies, the NNPC and the CBN, asking for intervention funds for FX. Based on that, we'll get what you call volume allocation from the NMDPRA. And based on that, they would allocate FX for that volume or value according to the marketers.
Yeah.
It went well until a time where there became paucity of FX. Now, as the paucity of FX became worse, they just looked away. And then basically it was a case of, you know what, go into the market and find the FX you can find and apply it to your imports.
Yes.
So what did that do? And you've rightly stated there was an arbitrage opportunity. So two things happened. you would get, let's say, 1,200 at a level that is what you call CBN rate or NAFEX, as the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the black market, you might get a 1,400 or 1,500. So if people go and get at the black market rate, automatically means that their landed price of product is much higher. The second thing is that once there's an arbitrage situation, then some people will sit down and do nothing and just decide that, you know what, I'm going to hold this greenback. And when it gets to technically, what they're doing is that they're trading that greenback for no transactions. It's not a transaction. It's not going to import. It's not going to fuel manufacturing. No, it's just making speculative gains. That also weakens the naira. So you see, the problem was that as that continued to go on, 4 or 5 layers of windows came in. And then it was the highest bidder. When the new administration of, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration came in, they tried to close both windows. Sadly, it's not been sustainable because some windows are opening again. But it's very, very simple, Omono. I can't but go back again to 2.2, 2.3 million barrels of crude oil a day.
Yeah.
If there's so much effect in Nigeria coming in from balance of payments, crude oil sales, these issues and windows that we're talking about, they just disappear because it's a supply issue.
Yeah.
One policy the CBN seems to be getting, I believe that they opened an electronic bidding window. And you notice that when that happened, there was an immediate apparent gain or strengthening of the naira.
Yes.
So the solution to that is that once you use technology and introduce technology into this thing, the faceless faces, quote and unquote, become revealed because there is a thrill to those transaction dynamics. I do believe that is what they need to do. And do that, it shouldn't be a problem. We should be able to get out.
Okay. So you've practically answered my next question, but I'm just going to do a little follow-up to what you just said. So aside from the technological solution, what alternative financing models could people in the sector adopt to ensure steady fuel supply without putting excessive pressure on our foreign reserves?
Omono, I didn't hear the last part. Without putting what?
Excessive pressure on our foreign reserves.
Okay. So the first and foremost is this. When you look at a lot of African countries or some countries in Europe, there's a single source of foreign exchange. And you find out that if you walked into a commercial bank, across the counter, you could buy FX.
Yes.
So the question is this. Have the BTCs, Bureau de Change, exchanges, they really helped this conundrum? Because where you have quite a bit of them, no matter how much they're regulated, those are layers of arbitrage opportunities. So personally, in my opinion, I think what needs to happen is that once there's FX in the system, then it means that you go into a bank, a commercial bank, and those become the single point of contact in terms of exchange of naira for foreign exchange. The BTA system worked for quite a while until, again, there was a paucity of FX. So I think one system that needs to work is that make the banks, which is they actually become the points of exchange. So you close out on speculation. The CBN is strong in terms of regulation.
Yes.
So, I mean, you can't just wake up one morning and say, I have $1 million FX and I want to sell it at 1,900. There's a method to every madness. So it means automatically the CBN would have published NAFEX, NAFEM rates, and everybody sees what the I and E window is.
Yes.
So you should be able to walk into that bank with documentation and get your monies. Simple things like transfers. If you had a DOM account at a certain time, you could transfer from one account to another account. There was a reign on that. Now, the fact that some people will do transactions electronically, you get on Amazon, you're not paying anybody money. You want to do business shopping, you're not paying anybody physical money. If those restrictions are removed, then what it means is that there is no excess need or desire to want to go and look for the greenback to store in terms of a future that you can't see. I believe these two things need to happen and happen on a sustainable basis. The third and final thing is that when you chase monetary policy, which is all we've talked about now, the fiscal policy has to align with. I mean, at a certain time, you found out that when allocations, federal allocations from federation accounts were shared, there was some pressure on the naira because governors or some states into foreign exchange. So you must make sure that the laws that govern foreign exchange purchase and sale do not just work for the citizenry, but they work for the nation. That way, everything is pushed back into the banking system, and then automatically there's some more visibility. Those two things or three things, in my opinion, are the way to go.
Okay. So my final question would be, many oil-producing nations have sovereign wealth funds or similar mechanisms to cushion citizens from oil market volatility. So given Nigeria's unique challenges, what wealth distribution model would you recommend to ensure ordinary Nigerians benefit more directly from our oil resources? Because right now, many of them will tell you they are not benefiting anything.
Absolutely. I think that if we look at this in retrospect and going forward, one thing that has happened to do quite well for Nigeria over the last 6 to 7 months is the stock exchange. So let's look at it this way. Every institution or every body that trades shares or lists on the stock exchange is held to a higher standard of probity and accountability. So the first thing, in my opinion, when it comes to oil and gas, the NNPC, as she's currently structured, is not going to take us to the promised land. Between MOFI and Ministry of Petroleum Resources, they need to free up a certain percentage of their holdings. And the NNLNG model comes to mind. It is well run. The NSIA, Nigerian Sovereign Insurance Wealth, is well run. But these places are run based on two things: best minds and corporate governance. So back to the oil and gas sector. Once companies like the NNPC, Nigerian Gas Company, begin to list on the stock exchange, it means that they have moved into the realm of better corporate governance. It means that ordinary Nigerians, anybody can walk to the floor and say, look, I want to buy so and so share. Now, the more viable those companies become, the more revenue they're able to drive. But revenue is just top line. To get to bottom line, it means that your cost of operations, cost of finance, cost of transactions must be so efficient that at the end, you have a profit and not a loss, which returns the capital. Omono, that is one thing that needs to happen. The only way more people can get involved, begin to earn, let me say, money from the black gold that God has blessed us with, is the stock exchange. It is never going to be by transactions. Because if it's by transactions, everybody at the helm at NNPC would have their own inner caucus. That way, you'll find out that Nigerians are not benefiting from it. The more revenue comes into oil and gas, in terms of, look at things like gas commercialization. For a country that has 207 trillion scoff of gas, we haven't scratched the surface. So it means that investments in pipeline infrastructure have to be done in such a way that people can invest. There's the infrastructural bond. So maybe we need something like the petroleum bond, something that people can buy as mutual funds, as investment funds. But then again, for all this to happen, I must say again, corporate governance has to enter the NNPC, because if not, that money will just be filtered away. I think those are two things that need to happen, and need to happen sooner rather than later. It does seem every president that comes into play doesn't want to tackle that elephant, and I really don't know why. But if that happens, you now find out that things like petroleum pipelines Once you begin to let them go under PPP models, then people can buying stock, buy bonds, buy 180 days debentures, any and everything, financial instrument. And that raises capital, but at the same time, because it's a viable project, you get good returns on investment.
Yeah.
That's how I think that will help.
Okay, thank you so much, sir, for your time. And I will transcribe this and publish on Saturday morning.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.